Hello and welcome to Discussion Today. I am Tina Jha. On the show today, we are going to talk about India's growing tribe of unicorns. A conversational messaging startup, Gupshup, has become the 10th startup to join the unicorn club this year after it raised $100 million in funding from Tiger Global Management, propelling its valuation by 10 folds to $1.4 billion. Gupshup provides its application programming interface to businesses for customer engagement across more than 30 communication channels, especially through SMS. This includes providing chatbots, bot building tools, Omni-Channel inbox capabilities, conversational AI, and also client-side software to manage communications. Now, the first week of April has already seen almost 6 startups attain a valuation of more than $1 billion, thus becoming unicorns. And these include infrastructure technology provider Infra Market, health tech provider InnovAcer, non-bank lender 5-star business financer, e-pharmacy API Holdings, social commerce startup Meesho, and fintech companies Digit Insurance, Groww and Cred. On Discussion Today, we will analyze the factors behind this current boom in the Indian startup industry and how the growing unicorn club is driving change in India's corporate landscape and the economy at large. Joining me on the program are 2 special guests. Let me introduce them to you. I'm joined today on Discussion Today by Mr. Rangarajan Krishnan, Chief Operating Officer, 5-Star Business Finance Limited, and Mr. R. Ramanan, Mission Director of the Atal Innovation Mission, Niti Aayog. Welcome, gentlemen, on this edition of Discussion Today. Mr. Krishnan, let me begin the program today by first congratulating you on attaining this in fact, entering the unicorn club this year. So very briefly, if you could share with us your story about how your firm started and your journey to becoming a unicorn.
Sure. Firstly, thank you for having me on the show. We are a very differentiated unicorn in the entire industry. Most of the unicorns are young startups, whereas we have a history. We started in 1984. We are a very specialized financial services firm. We focus on providing small ticket business loans. India is a theme of financial inclusion. Most of the larger banks and NBFCs typically focus on people who have credit histories. But if you were to look at India, India's real story is not India, but it's the Bharat. We have a growing set of people and society which will thrive if they are able to be provided with financial assistance at the right time. That's essentially the target segment that we focus on. We essentially provide small ticket business loans to people largely from tier 3 to tier 6 cities. So far, their alternatives are borrowing from unorganized sectors and money lending. And we are a RBI registered non-banking financial company. Our aim is to provide and promote real small businesses in the true heart and Bharat of India, which is what we have been successfully doing. So from 2015 to 2021, we have grown by roughly about 30 times overall in terms of size. We are backed by multiple set of really best of the breed investors. We are backed by we are really backed by US-based investors, Mauritius-based investors, and Singapore-based investors. The company was promoted and started by Mr. Lakshmipati, who is the current chairman and managing director of the company. Our first round of funding happened in 2015. Over a period, with the increase in size and with the increase in profitability and with a very strong focus on asset quality, we have been able to get a space today, which is a very specialized and a niche space. The latest round of funding was led by our existing investor, Sequoia Capital, and it was followed by Norwest. And one more new large global investor joined this round, which is KKR, and that got us into the famed unicorn club, as you can call it.
Okay, so
yeah. So in essence, I think we are a very differentiated financial services provider, largely catering to people who do not have access to formal finance.
Okay, so since your company is growing by leaps and bounds, particularly in the last 2 years, Mr. Krishnan, what I would also like to understand from you, the factors that are today helping the Indian startups achieve the aspirational status of becoming a unicorn at this rapid pace that your company has achieved?
Yeah, I think multiple factors are truly helping not just our company, but India in general. I would just like to list a few of those factors. I think firstly, private capital was not available to most of the firms, even about 20 years back in India. But since the start of 2000, private capital has been available to India. This is what we call as risk capital. So if you have a bold idea today, if you have the power to execute it, capital is definitely not going to be one of the limitations. There is enough and more capital to back the right set of people and the right set of idea in India for sure. Secondly, I think India has grown leaps and bounds by the improvements that we have made in tele-density and the availability of internet connectivity everywhere. And that really helps connect people. That really helps grow businesses. We are also nothing lacks us from the growth in infrastructure also. I think governments have really done well in terms of making sure that the infrastructure growth is in line with the expectation of the growth in the economy for sure. Tons of financial innovation has taken place over the last 10 years, I would say. We have a very progressive regulator and a government. So tons of innovations have happened around Aadhaar, around payment systems, around giving differentiated banking licenses. I think that has really spurred the growth in India by making capital available to one and all. And I would say lastly, the entire ecosystem. India has not just the demographic dividend, but I think even from the fact that we have probably the highest number of qualified professionals in the IT side, we have the highest number of qualified professionals in biotech side. We have the right set of ecosystem to really take advantage of what the opportunity which is available in India today. It's a combination of these factors. So I think what we are seeing today is the result of painful efforts that has been taken by regulators, governments, entrepreneurs over the last 10, 15 years. This decade is for India. Let me end with the fact that this decade is definitely for India, and what we are seeing is just the start of a large march that will follow.
Absolutely, and that is something that we are actually witnessing because Mr. Ramanan, just 4 months into the year 2021, and it's actually been raining unicorns. 10 startups that have actually entered the unicorn club. So a lot of factors have already been listed by Mr. Krishnan. But if we talk about better infrastructure and expansion of the internet penetration, so from that aspect, what have been the key enablers that are contributing to the growth of these unicorns in the country?
Thank you, Tina. And I think Mr. Krishnan elucidated some of the important factors which is driving this growth of unicorns.
Yes.
But overall, after all, India is at a cusp, and I think the COVID-19 crisis actually has brought to the fore, and the growth of unicorns particularly, has brought to the fore the power of Indian innovation and Indian startups and the ecosystem that has been built over the last several years. Today, we are indeed a country with more than 50,000 startups. I have read some figures at 55,000. We have more than 37 unicorns. And again, the number ranges from 37 to 47. And Credit Suisse report came up with there are 100 unicorns when you don't look at it in the typical way that you're looking at a unicorn. So somewhere the answer is between all of these in terms of the numbers. But I think the most important thing is there is a tremendous convergence of 3 factors that I think was highlighted. Number one, the demographic dividend that we enjoy. We are a very young country. We have more than 65% of our country under 35 years old. We have 10,500 engineering institutions, 39,000 colleges, 1.4 million schools. And this is driving the entrepreneurial spirit, the youthful exuberance, and the ability for them to be able to realize their dreams through entrepreneurial ventures. And many people are taking it. And why are they taking it? Because of the second important factor that we are one of the fastest growing economies of the world, growing at 6 to 8% barring the COVID-19 crisis. And when you have a strong growing economy, the ability to take risk capital, for capital to flow not only from within our country, but from outside becomes a possibility. And that is why people are willing to bet on good ideas. And there are many ideas that are coming up from these young, brilliant Indian professionals. And the third part is technology is changing the very shape of the world that we are all living in. It's become affordable, accessible, available in advance. And so you are now able to leverage latest technologies for the creation of new solutions, which can actually solve not only existing problems, but solve even anticipated problems in the future. So when you look at this combination and this convergence of computing, communication, networking, data processing, and technologies like 3D printing, robotics, IoT, or augmented virtual reality, the possibilities for Indian, bright, young Indian entrepreneurs to be able to leverage them has become more and more. The second important factor is the government has taken many initiatives like the Attain Innovation Mission or the DST or the DBT and so on to create a vibrant ecosystem of innovation and entrepreneurship in our country. And that itself is creating the birth of new entrepreneurs, and you're going to see a flood of unicorns hitting the marketplace. I think it was very beautifully captured by the Prime Minister in his Atmanirbhar Bharat call, where he said there are 5 pillars driving Atmanirbhar Bharat. The pillar of demographic dividend that we talked about, but that is actually giving birth to edtech startups. It is giving birth to fintech startups to address rural India needs. The second is a pillar of infrastructure. As the pillar of infrastructure grows, we need smart villages, smart districts, smart cities, and we need the ability to be able to service all of them. So that's driving a new breed of entrepreneurs and startups to be able to address that infrastructure needs of both physical infrastructure and digital infrastructure. And we have 650,000 villages, and we have more than 715 districts, and more than 8,000 small towns and cities. Now, when you try to fulfill that demand, the pillar of demand for all of this, that is giving birth again to many, many new solutions, and people don't have to move around here and there to find either capital or the infrastructure to be able to support their startup entrepreneurial organizations. And then the pillar of socio-economic progress. So you're seeing actually the birth of social entrepreneurs also going into the unicorn club, because we still have many challenges that we need to address. With 22% below the poverty line, 44% agri-economy base. If you convert this entire agri-tech, use agri-tech, for example, and there are many agri-tech startups which are coming up, these are going to have a big impact. And finally, the pillar of technology, which is making all of these glue together and make these possibilities a reality. So I think this is a tremendous opportunity for young Indian entrepreneurs to actually take their possibilities and their solutions and their ideas and convert them into unicorns and large enterprises. And that is happening, and that's going to happen, continue to happen in the next several years. I just want to end up with this particular point. The Y2K phenomenon in year 2000 was an awakener for the rest of the world on Indian IT capability. And as a result of that, it boomed the IT industry to a $190 billion IT/ITES industry today, giving rise to companies like TCS, Infosys, Wipro, and so on.
Yes.
The COVID-19 year, and in that year, we have had 11 unicorns springing. I mean, in a year of crisis across the world, 11 unicorns have sprung up in India. And as you rightly said, just in this year, 6 to 7 unicorns have sprung up. That shows the power of Indian startups. And this has been a watershed moment for Indian startups to be able to show their capability and their power to make transformations that not only India needs, but the world needs. And therefore, it is the Y2K moment for India in terms of the ability for startups to power the nation going ahead.
Okay, very interesting point that, because for other sectors, Mr. Krishnan, we say that despite the pandemic, so-and-so sector did well. But for the startup sector, the pandemic year 2020 and also 2021 have been particularly very, very good. If we speak about investments in Indian startups, and I was reading they've soared to a 2-year high in the quarter of March. Most of the recently funded startups that have seen a 3-fold jump in valuations. So what I want to understand from you is, what is it that is giving investors the confidence to take risky bets?
No, I would just summarize it in 2 or 3 points. I think firstly, this pandemic is probably the biggest crisis that any startup would have faced, in its existence since inception. So if a startup can actually face this crisis and thrive in this crisis and manage to expand beyond, that gives tremendous confidence to an incoming investor who sees the execution capability of a team, who sees what the startup can actually become and what is the opportunity that is available in front of a startup. So what this crisis really did is to make sure that it showcased Indian entrepreneurs in a very, very bright spot on how to manage a crisis and how to move beyond it. That I would say is the first of the points. I think secondly, what the startup also did is that it forced us into a new normal. Most people could have just taken a call that, I think given the situation, it's probably not possible for us to do business. But typical to Indian startup, we always try to see, given the circumstances, what's the best that we could do. And most startups really adapted extremely well to whatever challenges that was thrown at them. Be it technological challenges, be it people challenges. I think this is probably the first time in the history of India that we are welcoming people to work from home, and we actually consider that as normal. I mean, just quoting our own example here, this is the first round of funding that we have done where we have actually not met a single investor physically. So, doing such a large round without the physical meeting of an investor, without the diligence happening physically. So this is now considered normal. So as long as data flows are there, as long as people can see each other, I don't see any difference between me coming to your studio and talking or talking over the Zoom. So people have adapted to this, and there is a huge thrust on technology adoption which has happened, especially during this crisis time, which has accelerated what would have normally taken maybe 4 or 5 years for a startup to come to this point, especially technology-based startups. So I think that's a great speed zone that we all have passed through over the last 12 months, which is great. And thirdly, I would also say India is a very resilient economy. We had doomsayers, at the start of the pandemic, which said that India will take probably 3 years to come back, 4 years to come back. It will be a deep negative GDP growth. And as months passed, very, very quickly, the markets moved up, the sentiment moved up while we are in the midst of a second wave. But I'm confident that people are resilient, people are sensible. There is a vaccine that is in store at this point of time. So we will definitely triumph and come out of the situation, which is exactly what we have seen over the last 12 months. So it's a combination of factors, these things which have helped the investor take the right call. And I think that's probably we are one of the best economies in the entire world which has faced a crisis and have turned it to a complete opportunity for the last 12 months.
Okay, Mr. Ramanan, let me now come to the problem areas. One area of concern that comes to mind is the geographical diversity that exists in the startup industry. What we are seeing is, despite this massive boom, the firms are mainly based in the metropolitan cities. So what more needs to be done to actually take these companies to the tier 2 and tier 3 cities, and also covering different sectors?
So, I think this is a very important point that you said, and it is so very important for us to ensure that we create thousands of hubs of innovation in India, not just, the 8 tier 1 cities, yes, because we have more than 8,000 small towns and cities, and our people come from everywhere, and talented people come from everywhere in India. So one of the things that the government has been doing, and I know that we have been doing at Untitled Innovation Mission, is we are setting up world-class incubators across the various geographies of the country. Of course, at the school level, we have launched thousands of tinkering labs so that students acquire a culture of innovation and problem solving and innovative thinking. And today we have more than 7,200 adult tinkering labs spread across 680 of the 715 districts. So that itself by itself is creating this next generation of problem solvers and innovative thinkers, which is very important. Then at the university level, we have implemented close to 68 incubators in almost 26 states. So it is no longer just Mumbai, Delhi, Chennai, and so on. We are ensuring that these incubators, which are going to foster world-class startups, are being located across the diversity of geography that India has. And then that is not enough, because you have tier 2, tier 3 cities and rural India. So how do you stimulate Make in India innovation and local job creation? That is being done through Atal Community Innovation Centers that we are setting up exclusively in tier 2, tier 3 cities and in rural India. And these community innovation centers will create community-centric innovation for needs in and around the community. And there are many similar communities. Take, for example, if you're setting up a community innovation center in Goa or in Visakhapatnam, how do we boost the fishing industry? How do we boost the tourism industry? How do we boost the cashew nut industry in Goa? How do we boost the mining industry? Or how do you boost the shipbuilding industry? That sort of innovation, localized innovation, is going to also impact all the coastal cities. If you are going to create some great innovation here, that organization or that startup which creates that is going to have a market across not only the entire coast of India, but also other parts of the world. And therefore, this the slogan that the Honorable Prime Minister said, go vocal for local so that you can go global. That is the pathway for our startups in tier 2, tier 3 cities, rural India, to be able to address the local demand, at the same time create the opportunity for being able to launch it on a global scale. And thereby the unicorn gets also created.
Okay, Mr. Krishnan, so a lot is, of course, on the anvil to take the startup ecosystem to the tier 2 and tier 3 cities. But what are the practical problems that the current startups are facing when it comes to smaller cities, either basing them there or maybe starting their firms from smaller towns?
So I think some of the problems they face are the typical problems where you need access to capital and you need access to great mentoring networks in order to enable them to address the opportunity. The demand is not just where we are located, the demand is all over the country. But these two very important aspects of access to capital, access to good infrastructure for testing out their products and being able to, or testing out their innovative services. That is again a challenge for them, especially if they are in tier 2, tier 3 cities. But I think with the JAM Trinity focus that we are talking about, right? More than 1 billion Jan Dhan accounts or bank accounts which have been rolled out, more than 1 billion Aadhaar IDs and more than 1 billion mobile phones, you are now having the ability to launch a slew of applications which is bridging the digital divide and thereby enabling products which are being created in Salem to be sold in San Francisco or from Sikkim to Seattle and so on, or from Jodhpur to Japan. That is the sort of digital transformation that is required, a challenge that can be addressed leveraging 5G technologies, communication technologies, and the common service centers that are being set up in more than 100,000 common service centers have been set up by the government. So these become the points of development of innovation and the ability for startups to leverage and grow. But yes, access to capital and connecting them in a network of just like what he said. Today, Krishnan did not have to go and physically meet any of the investors. The investors came to him through the digital medium. That is what we have to enable on a large scale in India, and that will enable them to address those challenges.
Okay, Mr. Krishnan, talking from experience, because obviously there is no denying there have been a lot of factors that have been contributing to the startup growth story in India. But I'm sure your experience would have been also facing a little bit of challenges. So which are the areas that still require improvement as far as the startup ecosystem is concerned?
No, firstly, I would just like to say that we have, as a country, we have really moved leaps and bounds from where we were to where we are today. Be it in implementing bold initiatives, policy changes, or in making sure that ease of doing business in India is increasing and becoming better and better, for sure. But I think what can help, especially in attracting capital from FDI route, is going to be people will certainly look for regulatory clarity and making sure that they can take a long-term view on India. So I think as long as we can provide a very stable platform, a good government, stable government with clear set of policies, with lesser litigations, and making sure that our laws are tightened to make sure that it's going to be equitable and fair to the provider of capital and to the provider of a service equally from both sides. That will really help, to make sure that we are able to capitalize on the opportunities that is provided for India, at the same time attracting the best of the capital, which people are really interested in putting today. But I think from that infrastructure perspective, we still need to cover ground, is what I would say.
Okay, Mr. Ramanan, one final comment from you, because a lot of suggestions have come in from Mr. Krishnan. So in terms of policy and regulatory framework, what are the initiatives that are being undertaken by the government?
Yeah, actually, there are many initiatives by Startup India, Invest India, by the MSME sector in seeing how we can promote ease of innovation and how we can ensure that local products or startup solutions get assimilated into the marketplace more easily. How do we get rid of policies which don't encourage startup innovators? For example, if you are having large procurements, in many countries, government is one of the largest procurer of innovation, local innovation. And how do we facilitate that? So that is very important, because if you are able to turbocharge the procurement process and remove artificial obstacles and encourage innovation and incentivize innovation, you're going to see the birth of more and more unicorns. At the end of the day, people get convinced and develop trust in a startup or a product which actually rolls out into the marketplace and is successful. So we need to enable that, and the government is working towards that. The other thing that I want to highlight is, in India has typically had only 13% women entrepreneurs, and that's not a good number. Whereas in Attain Innovation Mission in the last 3 years to 4 years, we have launched more than 2,000 startups. And out of that, 625 are women-led startups. which means 33% of the entrepreneurs that are coming up are women-led entrepreneurs in the Atal Innovation Mission ecosystem. And hopefully that number is going to also translate into larger numbers in the larger ecosystem of 55,000 startups that we have. Now, it's very important for the government also to encourage women entrepreneurship and incentivize policies which is going to facilitate that. Because one is the ease of innovation for them, but now with digital technologies and digital transformations, you can encourage women entrepreneurs to operate from where they are instead of having to go and work in a separate place and so on and so forth. And we are seeing this tremendous interest by women in entrepreneurship organizations, whether it is deep tech innovation or whether it is livelihood entrepreneurship or whether it is rural entrepreneurship. So I think these are all some of the initiatives that the government is taking in a very positive manner, and hopefully they will all see the results tomorrow.
Absolutely. So we are also hopeful that it will turn into a reality very, very soon, and we will be able to witness it. So with that, I'll have to call it a wrap on this edition of Discussion Today. Thank you to both my guests once again for joining me on the program and sharing your perspective with us and our viewers. Pleasure having you on the show. So that's it from us on Discussion Today. Just in case you've missed the television broadcast, let me remind my viewers, you can also watch it on YouTube and Twitter, and you can also get back to us with your feedback and suggestions. Thank you for your time.